Welcome to episode 7 of the podcast. Just finished a hectic week of trading and had some deserved time off this weekend, especially given how nice the weather was. There's nothing more sad than being indoors when the sun is out. The sun's rarely out in this country, so you bet I'm going to look for any excuse to get a sneaky round of golf in. Season's just around the corner, so just shaking off some of that rust and just trying to get back into the groove of things. I had a match, by the way. I had a Tigers match, which is just a dramatic name, by the way, for those who aren't familiar with golf lingo, for single-figure handicappers in like a knockout sort of format. So I'm in the middle of some swing changes right now at the minute, so I was going into the match with an experimental swing, and I still got the job done, so chuffed about that. But it was only the first round, so really got to get things dialed in quickly. But usually if I'm not playing in a competition, you know, golf's a lot about the company you keep. You know, you want to get a good full ball together. You want to chat. You want to have fun and just enjoy a round. And this weekend was one of the less serious comps before the season starts. But the guy I was playing against, he was treating it like it was the club championship or something. I mean, we probably had less than 15 minutes of dialogue with each other throughout the whole round. Now, granted, he was a much older chap, good player too. He wasn't a bad guy, very mild-mannered and respectful, but just so uninterested in any sort of chat. So instead of trying to pry a conversation out of him, you know, I gave up after the first hole and I thought, all right, let's just get on with the game, you know, so we can get out of here. So, yeah, you know, I beat him 5-3, which is handy because the 15th hole at my home club kind of is like next to the 18th, which is a par 3 anyway, so I can just walk to the clubhouse. So we shake hands and he offers to stay for a drink. So I thought, whatever, you know, I was hungry anyway, and it's kind of etiquette, you know, to just stay after in the clubhouse, you know, after a game. So I thought, yeah, whatever, you know. So I get changed and freshen up and get to the spike bar. And Easy beat me to it. You know, he's seated there and he yells across the bar, "I'll have a rock shandy, please." Can you believe the cheek? He's at the bar before me, he's seated, and he's waiting for me to buy his drink and bring his drink. And when I do bring his drink, he sits there in silence. So I just couldn't figure this guy out. He wasn't a bad dude, just an older chap. And, you know, maybe it was the generational gap. I don't know. I just couldn't wait to get out of there. You know, and I guess, you know, I'm so used to playing golf. Every time I play golf, it usually cuts into my schedule. So it's usually working. I'm usually working around trading. But for the first time, I literally had nothing to do after the round, and I was just itching to place a trade, you know, which is not good because it's kind of an odd place I find myself in when I'm not working. I mean, I'm so used to working. I've just been going, especially because I've been going so flat out over the last couple of weeks. And it's been a great run. So I said to myself, I'll give myself this time off to enjoy. But I'm finding I'm having to tear myself away from the screen. I'm just itching to place my next bet. Even when I'm on holiday, I just find it so hard to totally switch off and do something else. I almost feel guilty for not trading. I feel like I'm wasting time, not trying to make some sort of profit. And it's really not healthy. It's something I've battled with for a long time. And don't get me wrong, it could be worse. You know, you don't want to be one of those people who hate their job. You know, at least I love my work. But that comes with its own set of problems because when you're so used to working, you don't know how to enjoy your downtime. And even the last time I went away, when I was on holiday, I mean, it was holiday/work. You know, I went to Dubai. I go there pretty much every December, you know, for work for the most part because of the cricket schedule. And for those that don't know, throughout the winter, I pretty much stopped trading racing, the national hunt racing, and I just focus on cricket. And at that sort of time, through November, December, January, the hours are super unsocial. So all the matches are played in New Zealand, Australia, in that side of the world, especially since it was the Ashes and we're playing away. So the time zone is the complete opposite. So if I'm working from here in the UK, I have to sleep throughout the day and work throughout the night, which is just not healthy. And you feel like crap for the most part. And most of us just aren't wired that way. So at least I get to work through the morning and the early afternoon and enjoy some sun out there, which was the plan anyway. But again, I'm just battling with myself not to work, even when I'm abroad. So once the test cricket finished, I'll go to the pool, I'll get some lunch, play some golf, go to the gym, smoke some sheesh or whatever. And then I get bored. So I'll go back to my room and I'll look for something else to trade, whether it's 2020 or a boxing match or something. I'm just itching to place a bet. So at the start of this year, I looked back over the last few months and just tallied up my P&L for all those markets that I didn't plan on trading, which I did trade. And I'm about evens. So all those countless hours, wasted hours, looking at a screen and not making money, I'm actually at a net loss, because when I do work on the markets that I do plan on trading, I'm not giving 100% because I'm a bit drained. So I'm definitely not getting the maximum profit from my bets when I'm supposed to work, because I'm not totally focused. Switching off is something you really need to learn to do as a trader. Otherwise, this job just consumes you and you end up working again. It ends up working against you because it's so draining having to concentrate. You can't afford to switch off when you are working. You got to be present all the time when you're actually in the zone trading. And if your mind starts wandering and you get impatient or you lose discipline and you're just not all there mentally, it's so easy to start taking positions that you shouldn't have been taking. And then you lose money. So it's very taxing staying in that sort of headspace for long, extended periods of time. And the time you spend away from the screen should be to recharge and switch off. So when you do start that next trading session, you're in a clear headspace. So the time you spend away from working, it should be aiding your productivity. It's very easy to fall into that trap of overtrading. I kind of compare it to other things that I've done relatively successfully. For example, when I was in school, I'd say I was a talented student. I never really studied throughout the year. I usually waited till the final few weeks of an exam when the pressure is on before I get going. Now, I don't condone that, but I know a lot of my peers used to look at me and some of the other guys who used to do the same thing. And, they didn't know how that was possible. They've been going to all the lectures, they're taking notes, reading through all the books, asking loads of questions. But, what I understood was that an exam is only an hour and a half long, 2 hours long, whatever it was. You're only going to get asked a handful of questions. So it's better to figure out what questions are going to come up, looking through past papers as clues, and then just borrow the relevant notes and, and get to work. And when I did get to work, because I had so much to catch up on because I hadn't worked throughout the year, I used to sit for hours and hours reading through the course notes and books day and night, sleeping probably 2-3 hours a day, if that. But after doing that for A-level, and I did well at A-level, I think I got A star in economics, I got A in maths, I got a B in history. But after working that sort of way, I realized that sitting for hours and hours, like 10 hours at a time, reading notes and then, trying to work, I'm only absorbing about, maybe 10-15% of what I'm studying. I'm working so hard. I'm just working like a donkey, and it's just a waste of time if I'm only absorbing 10-15% of what I'm reading. A lot of it I just forget. So I need to figure out how to be more efficient. So when I got to uni, what I actually ended up doing was I started allocating a chunk of time in the day when my concentration's optimal. So let's say it's the late morning or early afternoon, and I would only study 15 minutes at a time. Take a 15-minute or so break, absolutely doing nothing work related, then work another 15 minutes, 15 minutes off, 15 minutes on, and so on and so on. And my productivity went through the roof because I was able to concentrate better. When you're sitting there knowing you've only got 15 minutes to work, you're going to stay in the zone. Whereas if you sit there and you don't know how long you're going to be working for, it's just a lot harder to retain information. So just breaking it down into, into smaller chunks, just increased my productivity. I was actually able to retain information that way. So instead of working, 3-4 hour blocks at a time in front of the books, I was just spending 15 minutes at a time. So on a surface level, I was working harder, when I was sitting there for 10-12 hours a day studying, but I was achieving far less. Or if I compare it to something else that I do, quite successfully, which is play golf. Now, when I used to practice as a junior, I used to beat golf balls, for hours on end till my hands were sore, trying to perfect everything. Now, again, of course, practice is necessary. You got to put in the time. But again, like anything else, efficiency is more important than the duration of a practice session. So yes, I got better by putting in the hours, but there's a crossover point where it becomes overkill and you start overthinking things, and then it just ends up working against you. You see, with golf or any sport for that matter, there's a fine balance that has to be struck mentally and physically. Yes, you need a sound technique, but we're not machines. We have a mind as well. And something as intricate as the golf swing, with so many moving parts that need to fall in place, it's absolutely impossible to play well and think about what you're doing when swinging a club. You can't swing a golf club and think, okay, right arm across left shoulder at the top, left arm, left elbow against the rib cage throughout the follow through. Make sure that V in my right hand's pointing to my left shoulder. Break the right knee and on the follow through. Make sure the butt of the club is inside the ball throughout the downswing. Make sure the club head is pointing at the target at the top of the swing, and so on and so on. When you're standing over a ball, if you're thinking about all those things, you will never play good golf. It's not because those things are wrong, but it's because it should happen intuitively. The whole point of a practice session is to just focus on one thing at a time, and then when you actually hit the ball, you pick a target that you're aiming at, and you just fire. When you're walking, for example, there's so many moving parts in your body, but you're not thinking about technique. Left foot, right foot, heel to toe, heel to toe. No, it becomes second nature. You think about where you're going, and then you walk. So without going off tangent, the point I'm making is that I had to figure out how to get my practice sessions more efficient. I can't be working on everything at once, especially as I got older, when time got more scarce and other things inevitably took over. So what I started doing was I started recording my golf swing during a practice session. So when I swing the club well, I use that as a yardstick for when I play badly, and that way I can see if something falls out of sync and I can easily troubleshoot what's going on. And then I just end up working on one or two things maximum during each session. So just keep it short, keep it sweet, only have that one swing thought while I'm playing, and that way you can't help but play consistently. Efficiency is everything. If you do the right thing, right things will happen, and you got to keep it simple. So when it comes to trading, unfortunately, it probably took me far longer than it should have to figure out how to get things done efficiently. But, we're getting there. We're getting there in the end, especially this year. And we'll come on to that. As I said earlier, I fell into the trap of working really long hours, and I became addicted almost. And it was just totally counterproductive. I would work the horse racing, and then after the horses, I'd dabble with, the greyhounds. And then I'll be working on the cricket, and then I'll be working on the golf, and then I'll be betting on boxing. So this year I've made a real conscious effort to streamline my workload. So now I know well in advance when the busy periods are, when the down periods are, what hours I will be working, what hours I won't be working, which events I'll have to miss in case they cross over. So all these attentions to detail mean that I can really zone in now when I have to. Before, when I only had one small screen on just my laptop, I was literally trying to trade 2-3 markets at the same time because I was so hell-bent on not missing any opportunity to make money. And it was just so counterproductive, because even if there is 2 or 3 good opportunities for you to trade, you can only efficiently trade one market at a time. So something has to give. So when it comes to key events that cross over, something has to give. I just totally neglect one and then just focus on one. It's better to get maximum profit from one market than trade 2 markets inefficiently. But, now, I've kind of upgraded my hardware. So I've got a big screen, and I'm considering buying another one. Not because I'm trying to trade 10 different things at once, but at least I get more space, on the price ladder on the trading software. But in those instances where it's possible to take positions in more than one market, at least my screen space and workload is organized so I can manage those positions and I'm not flipping between tabs. So you really have to be prepared, and you got to be structured with your work. And I know a lot of this stuff seems like common sense now, but in my first couple years, I really wasn't taking this kind of stuff as seriously as I should have been. So if you're serious about making money, you're going to make sure your workspace is appropriate for what you're trying to do, and then have a routine or a calendar so you know exactly when you're working, when the busy periods are, when the down periods are. And that way you can really anticipate also how much money you're going to make. Because it's so easy to get caught up in the moment, especially when you have a loss. You know, a lot of the time, if you don't have a routine, if you don't have a structure, if you can't see the events that are coming ahead, you can get too caught up in that loss, and then you try and make it back immediately, and then you lose patience. But if you have a calendar, if you have a game plan throughout the year as to when you're going to work, you can kind of zoom out and then look at the events that lie ahead and realize, look, it's not all that bad. There's plenty of opportunity to make it back. And you just need to be patient, because depending on what sport you're trading, or better yet, if you're trading several sports, there's going to be bountiful opportunities throughout the year. So for me, the winter months are when the jump racing begins, and there's usually not anywhere near as much prize money on offer during the national hunt season. The markets are a lot thinner, the races are a lot longer, meaning it's harder to concentrate, and you have to pick your spots. Because if I do trade national hunts, I like waiting till the end, till the business end, where I can be really sure of the moves in play. Because, you know, pre-races are a lot harder during the winter because the markets are thinner. And, you know, looking at those races, it's just not an efficient use of my time to be sitting there making small £5 trades throughout the day when there's test cricket on, which is super liquid. And this winter was the Ashes, so you'd routinely see well over £40 million matched per game. So I can get on for really large stakes and make more money on one good trade than I would in 3 or 4 days worth of horse racing. So the winter schedule, usually between November till around February, March, typically, I'll focus almost exclusively on cricket, and I'll place the odd bet on golf or boxing and MMA. Boxing and MMA, I don't really trade. I kind of just place outright bets because usually the markets are a lot thinner. So yeah, I just let them ride out. And I've got a good hit rate on boxing, not so much on MMA. MMA is a lot more dynamic than boxing. It's a lot harder to price up fights. But boxing, I've got pretty much a night. It's dipped a little bit. It's around 85-90% hit rate. Betting on fights, so I just let those bets run. But when it comes to trading, it's almost exclusively on cricket throughout the winter. You know, as I said before, in a test match, I can make, in total, across the 5 days, I can make a dozen or 2 dozen good moves, and I'll make 4 figures per match pretty consistently. And when you tally that up over the course of, say, 20 to 25 test matches throughout the winter, you know, it's really good money, and it's worth my time. And when you're used to getting on for such big stakes, another problem is that it becomes really hard to make that mental adjustment to smaller stakes, as I would have had to do in racing during that same period. Like I said, you know, if you're placing 1,000, 2,000, up to 5,000 pound bets, sometimes it's really hard making that mental adjustment to, you know, 5 to 10 pound stakes. So I just leave it all together. Or if I do trade racing, it's just reserved for the Saturday Australian markets and the feature tracks of the UK racing. And that's it. You know, on those days I can make 300 to 400 pound pretty consistently. And even when I was out in Dubai, I had to go on some of the Australian racing. And I think I actually broke one of my previous records. I think I made around 500-600 pound in one session. It's on my Twitter page, so you guys can check that out. But throughout the winter, if I'm going to trade, then I really just focus on Saturdays. It's really not worth my time working on national hunt racing. So it's just about using your time efficiently. You know, that's kind of the point I'm making. There's nothing worse than sitting there on a Monday or Tuesday, late afternoon, watching Foss Lass or Dundalk when there's literally 4-figure prize money on offer, and there's only like 100 grand matched pre-race. It's just a total waste of time. But this winter actually was pretty kind to me, time-wise, when it came to test cricket. And those that traded the Ashes will know exactly what I'm talking about, because England took an absolute pasting throughout the series. We didn't win a single game. And we managed to salvage a draw, I think in the third or fourth match, and that was just because of the weather. But even that game we nearly threw. It came down to the final wicket and Jimmy Anderson held on, I think. So throughout that test series, you could literally just back Australia or just lay England and then just take the dog for a walk. So I wasn't trading more than a couple days or 3 days tops for each match during that series. And, we just collapsed pretty much every innings. It was just awful. And whenever we did get a little partnership, I would just cost average my way into the Australia price. So I was trading the other games between like Pakistan games or the New Zealand, India matches. And other than that, I dabbled in some, the Bangladesh 2020 stuff and even succumbed to betting on racing. But like I said, when I tally up my results outside of Test cricket, golf and boxing, I was around net evens simply because I didn't have a good edge in 2020, not to mention how badly fixed those leagues were. And I just couldn't make the mental adjustment to smaller stakes on racing. I'd make small win, small win, small win. And then I just had that itch, to make a big trade just because of the stakes I was so used to betting with on the cricket. And I just throw my profits. So I just really gave up on the winter racing. And like I said, I trade the odd Saturday, which I did well on. But, now with Test cricket winding down, I think there's only a couple games left. There's a couple games on right now as I'm recording this. I think it's West Indies versus England and Pakistan, Australia. Rubbish games, but good for trading. I mean, the pitches are so flat and just so dead. And bowlers having a real hard time, which isn't really a good advertisement for Test cricket, especially in Pakistan, now that we've got cricket back there. But yeah, just a couple games left next week in South Africa. And Cheltenham has really kicked things off. So I'm really starting to gear up and make that transition back towards racing. Now, the flat season doesn't typically kick off till the beginning of May with the Newmarket Guineas, I think. I'll have to check. But we have 2 major meetings before that with Cheltenham Festival, that's just gone, and the Grand National, where I can use pretty much the same staking as I would have done in Test cricket, which is a big advantage mentally because I don't have to make that mental adjustment, to different stakes. It just becomes a smooth transition. So all those $3 grand, $4 grand bets I was placing on cricket, I can now do that on the racing. So I'm a pre-race trader, for those that don't know. I still bet in play, but mainly pre-race. And when it comes to trading the odds pre-race, you're usually getting stuck in the final 10 minutes or so before the off, because that's when the prices really start to move as the money starts to pile in. But Cheltenham is one of those handful of weeks in the year where I'm trading the races hours, like 2-3 hours before the off. The liquidity and the money just flooding through the market's insane. You don't find that at any time of the year. So I find it easy because I've been doing it for a while now. But a lot of people aren't used to it. But it totally suits my eye when trading. So I always look to make it one of the most profitable weeks on a per race average basis. In other words, yes, I'll typically make more than usual, but more importantly, I only need to trade the 7 races a day during the festival. So it's a lot easier for me to focus. So in the few days before the festival starts, I'm looking at previous year results, trying to figure out where my strengths are, where my weaknesses are, where I messed up, where I did well, which trainers are favorite to win the most races, and so on and so forth, and just have a browse through the racing previews to see which horses the sentiment is usually leaning towards. Just trying to get any sort of clues as to which horses are going to steam in on the prices, because you want every sort of advantage obtainable and you have to get there first. And it's really advantageous during a festival to have it being dominated by a handful of trainers. So the reason for that is, when horses from one stable keep winning, the market's going to anticipate that the same trainers' horses are going to win the next race. So if you made it to the end of this podcast, I'm going to let you in on one of my little edges that I use during the festival. And that is to keep several races of the day open at once. Because as soon as one of the hot favorite trainers' horses crosses that finish line, a horse from the same stable in the next race or the race after is going to almost instantaneously shorten up by around 5 or 6 ticks, and sometimes as much as 30 to 40%, depending on how long you ride out that trade up until the off. Now, in previous years at Cheltenham, it would happen a good few minutes or seconds after the horses won. But with time, as the markets become more efficient each year, now you're competing against more people and everyone's trying to get there first. So there's a lot more shrewd traders and punters out there. Now the market moves before the horses even cross the finish line. So you need to have real quick fingers. You got to be on the trigger. As soon as that horse looks dead on to cross the line, then you got to back a horse from the stable in the next race, and you should secure yourself a good few ticks. So that's one of several strategies that I deployed pre-race, and that probably netted me a good £500 or so, around £500 profit out of the £2,400 profit I made in total pre-race, which is slightly above what I projected to make this festival pre-race based on my staking and previous year results. But I did trade quite aggressively this year, which worked quite well for me pre-race, but I did pay the price in play, as I lost around £600 in play. So that brought my total down to around £1,800, which is round about what I expected to make. And I guess I was more unfortunate than anything in play, as there was, a fair amount of fallers that I was involved in. And I remember the first race of the day on day 3, it was basically between two horses. So there was 2 Irish runners, and bearing in mind it was St. Patrick's Day. So, all eyes were on the 2 top horses in the first race of the day. They were both around even, so, it was either going to be one of these 2. And it was Galopin Des Champs and Bob Ollinger. And I'd already made my profit pre-race. I was probably around £100 up, I think. So I let it run in play, and I laid Bob Ollinger at the right time. And Galopin Des Champs, who was literally favourite by a hair, only had to jump one fence, the final fence, to win. And he had a good furlong or so lead. He was just cruising so nicely throughout the race. And he was around 1.01 by this point, and Bob Ollinger was around 1,000 to 1. And the favourite, Galopin Des Champs, trips and falls at the final damn fence. So I fired in a back bet as soon as I possibly could on that second favourite at 13 to 1, and I only got £1 matched. So I ended up going from £100 up pre-race to around £200-300 down in play, to around £100 loss in total. And so I was just seething. And I think the day before that, I had another in-play punt on Tiger Roll. Now, Tiger Roll's a great runner, a pretty famous runner, actually, that's had a lot of success at the highest level. I think Tiger Roll's won Grand National before. It's won a few Cheltenham races and just a lot of victories around national hunts racing. But he is, at the end of the day, close to finishing his racing career. It's an older horse, so he's in his twilight years. But in the racing previews, a lot of pundits were picking him. And I trust these guys to know more than I do, because I don't really look at form when it comes to in play. So the market sentiment was really leaning heavily towards him, and he was, I think, the second or third favourite. So there was good value on him. And once again, I made a good chunk pre-race, and I was itching for that one big trade throughout this whole tournament. So I thought, this has got to be it. So I back him in play. He was running well, let it run, topped it up, and I thought he surely, he'll see this one home. He was running so well. He'll likely retire after this race. This will be the perfect send-off. It's written in the stars. And what happens? He gets beaten in the final furlong. So that was another potential £200-300 winner, which ended up being a £100 loser. And I did something similar on the first day too. So the in-play trades I made were good calls. And if it was any other week, they probably would have won. So I can't figure out whether I was greedy, whether I should have traded out, or whether it was just unlucky, because I didn't really feel like I did anything wrong with those trades. So sometimes you just got to chalk it up to the game, take it on the chin and move on. And that's exactly what I did this week. And I'm really proud of the way I stayed disciplined throughout the entire festival, because I didn't go into full tilt. I never tried to claw back losses. I was patient. I took it one race at a time. I focused on one race at a time, and it really showed in my results with my consistency. So I uploaded my entire festival results, all 28 races, on Twitter. So you can go check that out if you haven't seen it. And one thing you'll notice is that my results were in a very tight range. My worst loss being around 150 pounds, I think. And my biggest winner was somewhere around up to 250. I can't remember exactly. But it was around a 400 pound range, which is very consistent and very good for me. Things would be very problematic if I was having 800 pound winners and then 1,000 pound losers. Because if my results were that sporadic, then it would be seriously detrimental to my mental approach. Because if I lose $1,000 on a race, I'm either going to have to take serious in-play risks to make it back and risk going even further in the hole, or I'm going to have to waste 2 days chasing it back. So, you really want to make sure your losses are manageable. So, if things didn't go my way, I'd cut my losses early and I'd take that 100 pound or so loss, because I know that in the next race, I'm only a good few scalps away from making that back. In other words, my trading became a lot more efficient. And as I said earlier, making a calendar and highlighting the key events and projecting what I'm expecting to make at each event is a great way of streamlining your workload and keeping your expectations in check and working towards things in the long run. You can't just sit back and say, okay, at the end of the year, I want to make 80,000 or 100,000 profit without any sort of game plan, because it's just so far away. It's almost unobtainable, and you don't know how you're going to get there, and you don't know how you're going to trade to get there. So it's far easier to break it down into smaller chunks, event by event. And that way it keeps you focused on the task at hand, and it stops you from overworking or over trading. So, for example, me personally, I've got look, this Cheltenham's coming up, and I said to myself, all right, £2,000 profit, very obtainable. We'll keep that as a target. If I said to myself, all right, you got to make £4,000, and just overestimating how much I'm winning, how much I'm, targeting per festival or per big meeting. If I'm overestimating my profits, my projected profits, what's going to happen is, if I trade, let's say I traded the exact way I did and I made £2,000, it would have been disappointing for me. And if you're disappointed with making profits, which is the whole point of the game, green is green at the end of the day. If you start getting to a place where you're disappointed with the profits, you're going to fall in that trap of trying to take on more risk and potentially expose yourself to bigger losses, which are harder to come back from. So I always make sure that I keep my targets very conservative. I underestimate my targets. I trade aggressively, but I underestimate my targets. So that way I don't take on any unnecessary risk. So yeah, as I said, this year I've got a calendar. I know exactly which key events that I'm going to zone in for. And between that, I'm going to make sure I take time off so my mind is fresh, so that I can go at it fully when I have to. And having done this for a while now, I can look at key events in previous years, and I can look ahead at the year and kind of gauge and anticipate what I should be able to make. So, for example, the next Grand National is coming up. Boom, that's £1,000 there. Or the Newmarket Guineas, £500 there. The Masters, another £500 there. Royal Ascot, another £1,500 there. Epsom Derby, another £500 there. Glorious Goodwood, another £1,000 profit there. Summer Test Cricket, another $5,000 there, and so on and so on and so on. Just breaking the year down to small, bite-sized, attainable chunks of profit, and staying away from the screen, staying away from trading, switching off when I don't need to be there. That way I can peak at the right time for the right events. And that's what it takes to get the most from your results. And that's what I'm aiming to do this year. And it's already paid dividend, because this month, this March, it's been literally my biggest month so far. And I'm on track to break a PR. I think I said this in the last video. I'm on track to break a PR. So I'll do a video on that at the end of the month. I don't want to jinx it. I don't want to say how much I've made. But the way things are going, it's going to be a new record for me. So hopefully I get to upload that on Twitter end of the month and talk about it in the next podcast and how I got there. But yeah, writing down the calendar, having a goal, breaking it down into smaller chunks, stepping away, peaking at the right time. You know, these are key to maximizing efficiency. You know, there's no point working like a donkey and, you know, not getting the most from all that hard work. So whatever your goals are, whether it's losing weight, trading, playing golf, anything, break it down into smaller, achievable goals and focus on hitting them. And things will just happen a lot easier for you. So focus on efficiency, guys. I hope I've made sense here. I'm trying to break this down as, you know, as best as I can. So I hope this makes sense and I hope this helps. But let me know what you guys think. Don't forget to like, share, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. And I'll speak to you guys soon.